Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome all the attendees who have joined us on YouTube for our webinars, that is quarantine webinars, on the topic sailing through challenging times with inclusive workforce. So we have been joined by HR and industry leaders who will be discussing about the importance and the efforts that have been invested towards creating a diverse and inclusive workforce. Prior to initiating the discussion, just a reminder to all of our attendees on YouTube, we will be conducting a question and answer session towards the end of today's panel discussion. So if you have any questions for our esteemed panelists, please share them on the YouTube chat box, and on your behalf, I will direct those questions to specific speakers. You could alternatively send in your questions over email to either Mr. Vivek Shastri or to me. In fact, some of our registered audience has already done that. So I would, this is like a note to the speakers that our participants are quite eager to, hear your views, your viewpoints, to get some insights from you about creating diverse and inclusive workforce. So just a second, as usual, my laptop hangs at the start. Okay, an introduction about creating values. We are an ISO certified management consulting company, and we provide our strategic advisory services to organizations across industries. Our people and culture consulting is our HR advisory arm. Technology and risk is our IT consulting arm. We also provide business strategy consulting and brand strategy consulting. Executive search services have also been initiated, and we have been working tirelessly on this front as well. So this is a brief introduction about creating values as an organization. Our upcoming webinar for next week, which is scheduled for 17th of July at 4 p.m., will be about a critical discussion topic, that is succession planning, and how organizations need to focus their efforts in this direction and consider these challenging times as an opportunity to look at these areas and these interventions. So please make a note of our next week's webinar topic, that is succession planning, building next gen starts now. That is on 17th July at 4 p.m. So with that, we will be initiating the discussion for today's panel session. I welcome our esteemed speakers. The panel discussion will be around diversity and inclusion. Diversity is an asset that can help build resilient organizations. We are joined by HR and industry leaders to discuss about the actual benefits they might have witnessed by investing efforts towards building diverse and inclusive workforce. Also, what are the major challenges faced on this front and some of the ways to overcome them. We have Marketing, PR Brand Custodian, Director at Oxygen Services, India. Her professional experience includes domestic and global stints across industries. She has almost 3 decades of rich experience in management, brand, design, communication, and service excellence. In 2006, she started her journey with Oxygen as a creative director and consultant. She developed the online business thereafter. She was engaged for Oxygen's marketing and brand. Talent management responsibilities were clubbed in her many responsibilities. Our next speaker is Dr. N.S. Rana. He is heading the HR and admin function for FENA Private Limited. He is a seasoned HR professional with proven track record of HR capability development and leadership. He has more than 20 years of HR and corporate leadership experience in manufacturing, engineering, FMCG, pharmaceuticals, and infrastructure development industries. Strategic professional who deeply understands business HR alignment. Proactive change agent who facilitates participative management style in fast-paced, diverse workforce. We also have with us today Ms. Sushmita Khare. She is the Chief People Officer at Light Bite Foods. She has extensive experience in hospitality and food industry. Her areas of expertise include manpower planning, talent management, employee engagement, performance management, HR policies and procedures, statutory compliances, succession planning, etc. She has been instrumental in strategizing for expansion and execution of those strategies for her organization's operations. I will be moderating today's discussion. I am Sujata Sa, the Associate Director at Creating Values. Diversity refers to the traits and characteristics that make people unique, while inclusion refers to the behaviors and social norms that ensure that people feel welcome. Some of the important benefits are innovation and creativity. Teams that comprise of various backgrounds and work experiences collectively come up with more creative ideas and ways to solve their problems. And attracting talent is easier. People are drawn to companies that show they value diversity and inclusion. It is also a major booster to extend your market. Studies show ethnically diverse companies are 35% more likely to outperform their peers. According to a Gartner study, highly inclusive organizations generate 1.4 times more revenue per individual and are 120% more capable of meeting financial targets. So inclusivity equals to revenue. So that's an important statistics that talks about why organizations should invest their efforts towards building a diverse and inclusive workforce. With that, let's start today's panel discussion. I will be directing some specific questions to our speakers. The first question I will direct to firstly Dr. Meher, followed by Ms. Sushmita. So Dr. Meher, what makes these twin concepts of diversity and inclusion that appear so simple yet so intricate and demanding when it comes to achievement? Please unmute yourself, ma'am.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you so much for the welcome. Nice to meet you all on a Zoom call, Sushmita and Dr. Nirmal. Nice to meet you guys too. Okay, now, since you've asked me this question, Sujata, the two concepts of diversity and inclusiveness are deeply linked, deeply entrenched. And for any organization, if they need to carry on for generations, it's extremely important that they pay attention to this one factor. In today's working environment that we see a lot of startups in space, and we do see that everything is good about them, but the maturity factor to be able to hold on to a cultural thread is non-existent in most of these organizations. I'm not saying across all, but in most of them. And as I see it, as I personally see it, I see that there is a deep requirement for inclusiveness to happen. Diverse, we as a country, we are extremely diverse. We are people who are coming across from different states. India is completely diverse. If you go from state to state, there are language issues that people face in a national level company. So forget a global company. Global has much more to it. These language barriers, the cultural differences that people bring with themselves, all these things create a large variety. And on the other side, when we look at inclusiveness, I think most companies in India are great leaders of celebrating culture. So if you look at all organizations, they will always have a calendar and always have a plan where they want to celebrate religious festivities with the teams across the country or with the teams within the country, whether or not that religion exists in the company. So smaller companies may not have a Christian in Delhi working with them, but they do celebrate Christmas. So it's like that. So both these things go hand in hand, both of them go hand in hand. And it's important that companies do start laying plans, young companies do start laying plans to make sure that first, on one side, they build inclusiveness in their workplace, and then looking at diversity, which is a larger animal, then to look at diversity and bringing in diversity will be just another layer and a beneficial layer to an organization.
Sure. So thank you, Dr. Meher, for sharing your views on it. So Ms. Sushmita, the same question to you. That what makes these twin concepts of diversity and inclusion appear so simple, yet so intricate and demanding when it comes to achievement?
Yeah, I think Meher has, he covered most of the points. But if I see today, if we have talked about present, then it is a very different scenario. If we had spoken about it maybe 10 years back or maybe 5 years back, it would have been different. Earlier, the mindset to accept people from different diverse, background, may it be in terms of gender, may it be in terms of region, may it be in terms of caste or whatever it is, and in terms of anything, was very difficult. I remember I was working in one of the hospitality industries. Then I was in the hotels, and it was we had this target of having diverse population as employees in the hotel, and it was really difficult because the local people or employees, it was very difficult for them to be accepting people from other regions, and forget about the specially abled people. So, but now if you see, Sujata, it is very, very acceptable. And I think, the social acceptance and acceptance amongst the lateral employees, amongst the colleagues have increased. I must thank the new millennial employees who are very, very, I think, very open about it, and they accept these differences as a cohesive thing. So I don't think it is a challenge anymore. It is intricate, yes. Why I say intricate? For example, I had implemented a few policies where we had put specially abled people into the restaurants and into hotel industry. I'm giving you very live examples, industry. But initially when we started, it was very difficult and very intricately very difficult. It was because we didn't have the infrastructure. So when we are taking people of diverse culture or people, gender, we need to have the infrastructure first built into the system. I had people, especially able people who couldn't speak or couldn't listen, and taking an order in a restaurant is very difficult. So we had to make those changes where the lights and the sound, the lights were put on, some badges were put on. So you have to give them that kind of working environment for them to be getting into the system. So that is simplifying the intricate part. So very important. I think it is important, and it becomes simplified if you have the infrastructure in and the mindset to accept. And then I think there is nothing which is difficult in this. This is my point of view. And I remember, accepting some positions where we can do it as a social responsibility process. Like, for example, I had, I'm especially able in the sense who could not walk, but we gave them the position of an in-room dining order taker. So you need to have that mindset to be helping to the community, the society, and build the infrastructure and then include them. Then the inclusion becomes much more seamless and smooth.
Yes, very rightly put, and very well explained. That it's that yes, mindset shift has happened and will keep on happening. However, it's not just the mindset shift, but it's also that organizations need to invest on the infrastructure front so that actually diverse workforce feel inclusive and really feel welcome when they are working within organizations. Thank you for that, Ms. Sushmita. So the next question I would first direct to Dr. Rana, and then we'll move back again to Ms. Sushmita. Dr. Rana, what diversity and inclusion dilemmas or paradoxes have you come across, and how could anyone overcome them? Like, how can organizations overcome them?
Thank you, Sujata. First of all, I would like to thank Dr. Meher, Sushmita, Creating Values for creating this platform that we are interacting today. And also all the participants who have spared time and who are watching us live. Sujata, I think this is a very, very important topic. In fact, we are discussing today. And holistically, if we look at the diversity aspect, it's not only the gender diversity we are talking about. Diversity can be seen in terms of people with disability. It can be seen with the cultural and social diversity. Also about the sexual orientation. And the most prominent, as you mentioned about the millennials, so it's intergenerational diversity as well. And I would say at every front, we face challenges every day where how to accommodate all people with all their backgrounds, their diversified cultures, their language, religion, caste, creed. So these are very challenging situations with the country, as I would say in the global level, I would say. Before I answer your question, I would like to mention a few examples. In India, you will find, rather you will be surprised that where the population gender diversity could be 50-50 or maybe slightly up and down, but only 14% representation in our topmost institution, that is parliament. At global level, if we see, you find that only 19% women representing the state heads or the country heads, maybe prime minister or the president. In the corporate sector, if we see, we find that only 20% women are at management, senior management level, maybe 7% CEOs or maybe managing the businesses. If we talk about the people with the disability, 2% of Indian population is disabled, maybe physically, mentally, or by any other means. And one study was done where it was seen they interviewed 100 top organizations. Approximately 8 lakhs people were interviewed. And I was surprised to see the data that in public sector, you find that only 0.54% is available, employment available for the people with disabilities. It is even very low in the private sector. It is 0.28% disabled people are employed in the private sector. And if we talk about the multinational companies, it is 0.05%. Is it not shocking? It is certainly yes. And now look at the people with the sexual orientation, which we talk about LGBTQ. How much is the acceptability for these people? It's not that these people are not intelligent, they are not educated, they are not capable of doing it. But it is only because of some negative perceptions in the mind of certain peoples, and ultimately that lead to the disadvantage of such people. And if we talk about India, as Dr. Meher said, very diversified country with a lot of resources available, lot of language, lot of cultures coming together, becoming India. But ultimately, we also suffer from the same paradox with the word, very right paradox, the word you have chosen is a paradox and dilemma. So coming back to your question now, I would say the first and foremost thing is the lack of awareness. We ourselves, even me, probably I may not be knowing certain aspects of my personality, that why do I love somebody or why do I hate somebody, or what the perception I have and what's the reason of that perception. So first, lack of awareness about the concept leading to unconscious bias and the stereotypes. I think this is one reason. Second, I would say there is lack of organizational policy and culture. Whether it is the parliament, whether it is the private sector, whether any other organization, there is no such framework or policy or even the culture which can accommodate people with diversified backgrounds. Then commitment of the top management at all levels. In India, we make a lot of policies, lot of laws are passed, but ultimately when there is a commitment, the lack of commitment from the top, because ultimately the culture flows from the top. So if the people at the top are not convinced about the fact, if they don't want to implement it, if they have the different opinion about it, certainly that cannot be implemented in the organization and that cannot become a culture. Then there's no sensitization training also. Training and awareness is another area where we give all type of training to people. We improve their communications, we invest so much in their capability building, but when it comes to creating that diversity, adopting that diversity and inclusion, creating that inclusion for them. Because if I say inclusion, I would say respecting the identity and preferences of the people and treating them the way they want to be treated. The concept of treat others as you want to be treated is not probably working here. So you have to respect the people the way they want to be treated. The difference you can see, the intergenerational diversity, the millennial today want to be treated differently than the older people, the bloomers used to be. So unless, yeah, you're saying anything?
No, I was just agreeing and acknowledging the points that you mentioned.
All right. So being an HR professional, I'm sure Dr. Meher and Susmita also agree with me that there is always a challenge for us that what policy to make, how to make it so it suits both.
Sure.
Right? No, the next part you said that how can we overcome this particular situation? So if the solution to every problem lies in the base of the problem. If we create that culture, if we create that mindset, if we sensitize people that how can we be more open to diversity and how can we create that culture where the inclusion happen, we start liking people, adapting to the people as per their requirement. I think this job is not as difficult as it thinks to be. So commitment from the top management, number one. At the same time, the policy for reward and punishment. I think reward and punishment are two things which should go hand in hand. So we should create those policies and systems, the statutes, where the people adopting to diversity, promoting inclusion are rewarded, and at the same time, certain penal actions are also initiated who doesn't follow it. I think these are a few points which come in my mind that we can take care of to increase the diversity and inclusion.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rana. So the same question to Ms. Sushmita. What are some of the dilemmas or paradoxes that you have come across when it comes to diversity and inclusion, and how can those be overcome?
So as I said, being in HR and trying to, include, create a kind of a diversified, work culture and employees, we have been trying many ways to include, different people of different gender or whatever categorization of diverse workforce it can be. And we have come across lot of what do I say, hindrances in that, where, for example, I said we included people with especially abled people into the environment, but we didn't have the infrastructure to help them and feel a sense of, a kind of comfort there. That was where I think we failed. And then we again made the changes and in the infrastructure. And then, when they came back, they were quite happy and their work became smooth. Their productivity increased, their well-being increased. We could see them smile. So I think it's about, as Dr. Rana said, is sensitization of the management towards them also is very important. we have to train them again and again. For example, if they have to take an order, I'm in hotel and hospitality and restaurant business. So if they have to take order from a customer, they need to be trained and again with the sign language and how to take order. And the training has to be very very detailed for them. It is a very different set of training that goes. The what amazing what I saw was when I went to UAE to set up our restaurant in Punjab Grill restaurant in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. So I was actually talking to, that's the place of diversity and inclusion at a peak, and they do it so well. How do they do it? As a person, they get people from different countries, different nations, different parts of the world, and they include them into the system so well. And I could realize that 4-5 days of their induction includes how to sensitize everybody to each other's culture and diverse way of living, and their thought process and their body language, their sign language, what they should be doing, how to should be talking to a Vietnamese person, how do they talk to an American person, how do they talk to a European person. They had a very detailed orientation for every employee who was joining and every person who is connected to that organization. And I was really impressed with that, and I think we should do that for India. And that's the learning that I got in Abu Dhabi and Dubai when we were setting up our outlets there. And I said, we need to do it in India. And that also encouraged me to find out ways to include people of different diverse culture, and see how difference it makes. It really increases your innovativeness, increases your change management mindset, increases the brainstorming of getting new ideas and sharing of insights into things. It is a very beautiful thing if we can manage to implement in the organization. Yes. Yeah. But I feel that there are organizations who feel that they have their own limitations of including them into the system. Maybe their industry is such that they may not be able to take specially able people, they may not be able to LBG, whatever. So they may not include them. But I think if they open their mind and see ways, they can find where there is a will, there is a way. They can find ways to include them.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sushmita. In fact, some very interesting things shared by Dr. Rana as well as Ms. Sushmita. So Dr. Rana absolutely bang on that the culture flows top bottom. So all the efforts have to flow top bottom. A very interesting thing and a very simple thing I read a few days ago. The mother at the dining table told the son that go wash your hands prior to the dinner. And obviously the son was not that happy about it. Small kid wasn't that happy about it. But the father immediately told him that, come on, son, let's go together and wash our hands and come back for dinner. So that's how culture is, that you do not ask someone to do something, you lead by example. So that's a very good thing. And Ms. Sushmita, thank you for sharing that. Yes, even your training efforts, the L&D has to be customized to, to cater to the audience and to make them, feel welcome and to actually, upskill them the right way. So thank you for sharing those views. Now we'll be moving our third question first to Dr. Meher, followed by Ms. Sushmita. So Dr. Meher, how is unconscious bias affecting diversity and inclusion at workplace?
So now unconscious biases are those kind of biases that people do not know that they have this bias. People do not realize that their mind is tuned differently and to accept certain things and not accept certain things. So it's more on a psychological level that it needs addressing. And also the HR teams who are involved in recruitment, they need at a first level to be trained and coached to get over certain biases that they may have or may not, ideas or options, things that they think about, which they feel are right may perhaps not be right. So these are basically unconditioned, biases which need conditioning over a period of time to be overcome. Now, there are different types of unconscious biases. It could be, something that is related to probably, say, an affinity bias. So, if I'm recruiting and I find somebody from my old college, perhaps I would want to recruit them. So this becomes like a typical affinity bias. The next one could be like a halo bias. A halo bias. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
We can hear you.
Am I there? I mean,
Yes,
Yes, yes,
I
yes,
just,
yes.
okay, thanks. So the next one could be like a halo bias. Now, this halo bias comes about when we are normally, looking at increments, and we are looking at raising people to the next level. And at that point of time, we're mostly thinking that, we kind of pedestal people, that, oh, this guy has done one thing good, so he's going to do everything good. And, he's like, we put them on a pedestal so that our minds are tuned towards performing this kind of a halo bias. Then comes something called the horns effect. Now, this is the opposite of the halos bias, where we find that we form a bias on a person who's kind of, made one mistake at work, and we say that ye to sab kuch galat kar dega. He's going to ruin everything. Let's not use him. So that's called the horns bias. Like it's completely anti it. Then we have something that is like an attribution bias. Now, attribution biases are usually based on achievements and on failings. And this could be my personal achievements or failings, or while I'm interviewing somebody, it could be that I decide that all his achievements are false, what he's written in his resume. And I don't want to give him a chance because I've already formed this opinion that sab log sab kuch resume mein likhte hain. So that's another subconscious mind working, and we form this unconscious kind of bias towards people. The most important one is a confirmation bias. Okay, this confirmation bias is where our I mean, we look back at people where if a majority of the people kind of agree with something, so we say, okay, this is my thinking, and this is what everyone else also feels. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do this. So perhaps we're making a wrong value judgment over here. So these biases always cloud our mind, and when biases cloud our mind, it impacts our decision making the most. We when we are asked to make a quick decision, okay, say yes or say no, all these biases play up in our mind, and we say, yeah, this is my decision, and we have made a mistake. We have probably lost a great person we would want to employ, or we've not promoted somebody who could be having great prospect, or we've done something grossly wrong to the person. So my advice for people looking at these unconscious biases, we need to kind of make sure that our HR teams are first completely non-biased. They have to understand and rewire themselves mentally that, so what if I think like this, but perhaps it's good to go get another opinion from somebody else. Leadership also influences human resource decisions, and sometimes these decisions that by leadership are also through their subconscious, they don't know it's happening to them, but through their subconscious they feel that, yes, I think this is the way we want to go with this one employee, and his, say for example, you're doing succession planning next as an interview, and they may say that, this guy, the second guy, number 2, should be this fellow because he's perfectly fit for this, and this is my thinking. And then HR tries to go and implement it. But a good leader must also go through this complete rewiring, unwiring, and go through the program with the HR team, so that the leader themselves understands what they are going to do. And once they get over this bias is when they will be able to retain great talent. They will be able to nurture great talent. They will be able to get into a space where a culture starts growing. It's basically putting seeds in there and watching them grow. So this culture will bloom, and it will be known that this organization is without biases. Now, no organization is 100% without biases. They do creep in from time to time. But when a leadership and HR are beautifully in sync with each other, they throw opinions off, they throw ideas of each other, they brainstorm together, they look at the overall well-being. Past biases is when an organization can really flourish with good culture.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Meher. In fact, you've actually talked about varied biases and what do they mean and how do we unconsciously actually make our decisions based on the biases that we have. And absolutely correctly mentioned that these take time, first of all, to even develop and then to get over them. So time is required, a conditioning is required. So thank you for that. So Ms. Sushmita, the same question to you. How is unconscious bias affecting diversity and inclusion? Also, if you could throw light on some of the stereotypes that you might have come across, and something that we just, especially unfortunately in the Indian setup, we have so many stereotypes that we've lived with since childhood. So anything that you might have come across and you might
Well,
have.
unconscious bias is the hindrance for diversity and inclusion. Unconscious bias is there in that's called the mindset. Now, the somebody who is a decision maker of an organization, if he has that unconscious bias in his mind, then it is how it is going to go about in that organization. So this person who is the decision maker is the pivotal person in the whole system, whether diversity and inclusion is going to happen or not happen in that organization. Now, this unconscious bias comes into the decision maker because of his own background, his own life, personal life experiences, his own way of being brought up. Now, many of times, we hear this thing, I personally felt it as a woman. So when I went on my maternity leave for, and then, I was asked many by men, are you going to come back after your, pregnancy? Will you be able to manage? And I really see many people asking, "Arey, uska to bacha ho gaya." I don't think she'll be able to give that kind of time now to the professional life. These are those bias. These are small examples, but these are the bias which makes the culture go skewed towards a particular way of thinking, a skewed judgment about people. So unconscious bias is the real hindrance towards diversity and inclusion. And I remember people asking in the she very well said, Meher, you very well said, it should start with the recruitment team. Now I remember when I was young, I should blame myself for that, but when I had seen my seniors, so I also asked, so what are your plans for your family? You're a lady coming in and she's saying that I've just got married, I'm 6 months old in the system, married for 6 months now. And I'll ask, so what are your plans for your family? Now that is to judge whether the person will be there or not there in the system, whether she'll be going for a family still, then what will happen here? What will happen to the productivity of the the place for the work of her work? These are all unconscious bias,
The
and
Maternity
we
Act being
need
another
to
one.
overcome all these things, because I feel the generation of today, and we were also generation of old generation, we wanted to work, we were ambitious, we also wanted to have our own personality which is professional also. But India has these kind of lot of bias. So it relates to people with different diversity. It can be sexual orientation people, it can be gender, it can be of different region, and so this unconscious bias is something which we need to sensitize from people's mind. It is again training which needs to be given. But I have been working with the new generation of today, and I appreciate them that they do not have this kind of judgments, I feel, because I've come across of these young people. They do not have these kind of biases in their mind. Very, very, very limited. They have their bias of their own way, but I think it's just a matter of exposure of people who are decision makers to the outside world and different views of people regarding all these biases and how to overcome them. It's a very, very, very sensitive thing. It needs to be tackled, really.
Certainly. In fact,
Practicing awareness, I think, is something that is key to this, because if you're practicing awareness, and this practice has to be constant, because things keep changing. Like, I mean, I was talking about what Sushmita said about the maternity piece, and I recall that when the Maternity Act changed and when your maternity period increased, then everyone said that, oh God, now we should look at whether we should hire so many women, because women, if they come and they go and then they're out for a year and then they can extend it by another 3 months, and then we need to find a creche for them and we need to do all these things for them. So let's stop hiring women. So there are these kind of mindsets, and there were interviews that were floating around. It was a big topic of discussion. So I mean, while I agree with everything that is there, but awareness, constant awareness, things change around us, things are evolving. The younger generation is coming. They are adaptive towards themselves and their new cultures, but they are not very adaptive with the old mindset. So if you put them under a leader who's 50 years old or 60 years old and not cool, then you've had it. If he's a cool leader, then you're fine. But if he's not cool, then the organization is not cool and I'm changing my job. So I mean, there are all these things that one has to do and play today, and awareness is the key. It's absolute key, and it's constant working.
One more bias which I would want to also add here is, this is a man's job,
That's
or
a gender
this is a
complete.
job which only this kind of sexual oriented person can do, and maybe you for example, in my department, I would say, why don't you have lady engineers? But then, who will move around? We have to go from one place to another. Will they be able to, they be so agile? Will they be able to handle big equipments to be carrying? Even in kitchen, in a restaurant business, a hotel, a lot of earlier you never used to find lady chefs. Now you see the chefs, lady chefs are strong as men. And in the interviews, I jokingly ask, are you delicate, or you can lift up heavy stuff? She says, ma'am, just give me a chance. And I just love the confidence of the girls here. And I really must say, it is a very difficult job in kitchen for a lady, a commercial kitchen for a lady to be working in. But I must appreciate those ladies who have taken the challenge. And if they can do it, why can't we have ladies in different other diverse functions? So these are little small little biases that is there in your mind, and we need to come out of it.
But we've come a long way. We've come a long way, and I feel there is so much more base for gender, at least. I mean, I'm just talking about gender and not sexual preferences here. But for gender, I think we've come a long way. I mean, I'm looking at young girls getting employed from rural villages, coming to metros to stay in PGs. They're working, whether it's in a BPO, which employs a majority of them coming to rural villages. But I just see this move, and I'm so happy to see it. And I'm so I mean, as a change, I mean, I'm much older, but I feel that there's been a huge change as compared to what it was earlier and what it is now. So I think we're doing well, and we've come a long way.
Well, yes, with regards to gender biases, maybe, but still there is still a certain path that is untraveled. Correct. That needs to be covered. And
senior leadership moving up.
They manage
perhaps there.
And the culture that they build. So awareness is the key, because even the kind of bias evolve with time, and one very delicate thing that you also touched upon, which actually just went away very casually, but it was about young people, millennials or baby boomers, who you rightly mentioned, they would look at the cool factor. So rather, ageism becomes an unconscious bias for the younger generations who now come in. So yes, a constant effort on creating awareness, having sensitization trainings, and charity begins at home. So first the HR, the recruiters, and then how do they percolate it throughout the organization, including the leadership, so that everyone is conscious and everyone is aware about what are they even saying out, what are the kind of jokes that are also floated within the company. So even these little things build a culture for a company. So thank you for that. So we'll be moving to our next question, and I will direct that question to Dr. Rana. Dr. Rana, despite lot of initiatives that organizations take, a question remains that only by increasing diversity, are you saying that even the inclusiveness is increased within your company? So only by hiring people from diverse backgrounds, or for any other kind of diversity that you might bring in, does that by default say that organizations would become inclusive?
Thank you, Sujata. See, I think the fact has been emerged from the discussion itself. It's almost 4 decades that I know that people are talking about diversity, and maybe from ages, this issue has been there in the society, and it will still remain. A lot of things and strategies and plans and statutes are being created, for sure, yes, but much has changed, I would say no. As Sushmita was mentioning about education and the gender, yes, anybody, let's say somebody, some girl is passing through 12th and no, she want to take admission. So she has an interest in automobiles and want to go for mechanical engineering, or let's say for chemical engineering, or maybe a civil engineering. So first thing people will say, hey, this is men's job. I'm surprised how gender can come into somebody's, when somebody is wanting to explore his profession in that. But yes, this is the reality and it happens in our society. Very recently, in fact, because I come from defense background, so I'm more attached to that. Women, mean Sunita Williams or Kalpana Chawla can become astronaut and go into the space, but Indian women cannot become fighter pilots. They can become officers, they can go to any level, but they can't command the military establishment. So what sort of prejudice or the bias is this? I'm talking about, because most of the discussions are on gender diversity. So I'm just mentioning that these are few live examples that the prudent society even feel that way. I don't know whether it is conscious bias or unconscious bias, but it is there in the society. Now, in the corporate world also, I would say the term diversity and inclusion is certainly there. And in certain industries, particularly the new industry, particularly if I talk about the IT industry or service industry, you will find a lot of diversity is being accepted there, and it's happening. And a lot of strategies, plans are being also chalked out to create that inclusiveness. But still, if we talk about India, then the majority of the industry is still traditional industry with the manufacturing backgrounds and the traditional style of working. So still there is a lot of gap and a lot to be done on this particular aspect, I would say. What is happening? I would say it is more of integration than inclusiveness. We hire people, we train them to meet our culture, and in the shared culture, they are made to perform. We don't have two set of policies for the bloomers and for the millennials. In most of the organization, in the corporate houses also, you will see that nothing much has been done to make adaptation for the female employees, or still people there if you have to work, then you have to adapt yourself to the situation. So things are changing, things have changed, but if you say that it's a happy situation today, I would say a lot is required to be done. So now the again question comes that what should we do? So again, I'll go back to my previous answer that the first and foremost thing is that the top management has to be first convinced that yes, this is the need of ours. And today we are operating in very limited number of resources in the job market. But if we keep this job market open and if we have that mindset that we can hire anybody who meets our requirement, has the potential to grow and intellectually sound and can be fertile mind to adapt to our business requirement, I think we'll have a vast pool to choose from. And if we don't choose, they will be ultimately lost to the competition. So first is the top management commitment and their own outlook to perceive it, see it, that how can they bring in that inclusive culture in the organization. Second is the statute at the government level. Lot of acts are there in the country, maybe minimum wages, maybe equal remuneration, maybe protection for women under maternity act, maybe even for the disability people, a lot of acts for even the Supreme Court has roped in for LGBT issues and others. But how effectively they are being implemented? There is always a loophole. There is always people violate that. Ultimately, the benefit of diversity, which every organization, every individual should achieve, is not able to be achieved. So at the same time, there are lacunas and issues at individual level, at the societal level, at the organization level, and even at the country level. So maybe education is the one factor. The way now the education is spread and men and women are now, the young generation is going for education and the literacy rate is increasing. Probably this is a positive sign that in the time to come, probably it may change. But today the situation is great.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rana. And in fact, just that, although you have touched upon majority of the points, but we would also be discussing about diversity and inclusion at a wider aspect and not just restricting it to gender diversity. Because I think, like Dr. Meher has rightly said, although there is a path that we still need to traverse, but we've come a long way on that front. Dr. Rana, you have already talked about leadership and you've talked about why is it necessary that leadership needs to percolate this idea of inclusion. So I would direct a question to Dr. Meher first, and then Dr. Rana, if you wish to still add certain points from a leadership perspective, please feel free to do so. So Dr. Meher, how can leadership percolate the idea of inclusion across the entire organization? So maybe some points which have not already been discussed.
Okay. So we've touched upon a lot of points that leadership can hear. My internet is a little unstable. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Maybe for some time you could turn off your camera so that there is no lag in the voice. Yes, Dr. Meher. Dr. Meher, you need to unmute yourself. Yes.
Now is it okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
So in case there's a bandwidth issue,
So
you could turn off your camera.
So leaders. Okay, I'll turn off the camera because I think I'm having a problem with the bandwidth. Yeah. Okay. So basically, leaders, they really need to deep dive, as I was saying, into diversity and inclusion. Their deep diving is very, very important because, as I said, that it's basically the thread of the company, the thread that weaves each person in the organization together as a part of a family. And this is truly culture, nothing else but culture that we're talking about, benchmarking over here. Now, What leaders can do is, other than what we've already discussed, is be transparent. Transparency is a very, very important part of inclusion. Um, the people who work for you need to know what's happening with the company. They need communication that has to happen to them. Being from the marketing side and the communication side, I do see that as a big gap that happens in talent, because you may discuss your business goals in a boardroom or with key business operatives in the company, but you will not discuss the business goals with either HR, or you will not discuss it with your entire organization clearly. Not is It's not only important to communicate what good is happening in the company, it's also important to communicate what bad is happening in the company. There are some harsh realities that companies need to face from time to time. We are living in the times of COVID. We are seeing that there are things that are happening. Companies that have strong employee bonding are the only companies where the employees are willing to take a salary cut in today's day. Otherwise, they're leaving organizations. People who need that salary cut, organizations that need to survive and have had the lack of business in such time. So, again, coming back to the first point, that transparency has to be a core commitment of any leadership person. They have to communicate good, they have to communicate bad. Open channels of communication. Open channels of communication is number two. The channels of communication with leadership must be open. Most of the times it gets routed through HR, or it gets routed in a town hall, or it gets, people collect and meet, or at a festivity or at an occasion when leadership speaks. That's the time when people get to hear what's going on. But there has to be more opportunity where the leadership connects with their staff. There has to be more opportunity where team leaders themselves connect with their teams. We see that even team leaders do not connect with their downmost field guy who's struggling in the field somewhere in some remote state. So the leadership has to make sure that they weave such a communication channel which involves from the frontliner right up to the guy who sits in the head office on top. This is very, very important. Welcoming input from these people who are at grassroots level. Now, many companies are sales led. They have a diverse population, sales force that is working in different states, and these people don't come to the head office. They don't come to Bombay, which is the head office. They could be somewhere in Mizoram, or they could be somewhere in Punjab, but they don't get an opportunity to come to the head office. Inviting such field force over, making sure they feel what the company's culture is something important that leadership can do. Leadership has to initiate such action. Leadership also has to have the power of listening. Sometimes they will hear things that they do not like, they may not agree with. So in those cases, those points must be taken, they must be tabled, and your staff must know that you're going to come back to them with an answer. People, everyone will not speak up. Some people will speak up. That does not mean that you fire the guy who's spoken up. You need to uh, celebrate his guts. You need to say that, great, that was a great question asked, and maybe you do not understand the whole side of business, but this could be the reason XYZ. Or you say, okay, hey, we made a mistake. So accepting that with humility. Leadership must have humility when they are interacting, especially on DNI. They have to be able to accept what they are listening and what they are going to convey into action thereafter. They need to thereafter also educate and empower their own second line. So if the second line is empowered to be able to execute, if the CEO himself or a chairman himself cannot reach out, if the second line is authorized, empowered to be able to make those communications, frequent communications, then that also adds benefit and talks much about the leader who's willing to let such important communication flow. A leader must lead by example, which is why he's called a leader, and Dr. Rana has covered it at one point. A leader should not hesitate in folding up his sleeves. If you're talking about, say, for example, the hotel industry that Susmita caters to, restaurant industry. I mean, a restaurant manager should not shy away from picking up a table and moving it if his server staff is not free. So, I mean, what he's doing is he's not just earning brownie points for himself that, hey, I moved a table, but he's also earning respect in the eyes of his co-workers by lifting and moving that table. This is just a very small example, but in diversity and inclusion, this whole example becomes extremely different, because the leadership who needs to lead by example may have his own thought processes. Like Shushmita said, that people are conditioned, like it's taken them 30 years or 40 years to reach leadership position, and in those 30-40 years, generations have changed, people's ideas have changed, culture has also changed, everything has changed around them, and then they need to also change, and it becomes difficult. It's a daunting task. It becomes difficult for leadership to change, but leadership does change. Any leader who's interested in the well-being of his organization, who wants to see a very happy family tied by that common thread, will always make that change. Measuring progress, something that we haven't touched upon over here, is that a lot of activities are taken over by HR staff. The leadership gets involved. There are all these meetings that happen, reflection happens, communication happens, actions happen. But measuring progress, the real measurement of progress is like, um, you know, I mean, we talk, but walking the talk is important. So analyzing what we've done, being able to dissect what has happened, uh, being able to see that we were at position X then, and now after doing these activities we've reached position Y, and we are better off, or we've reached position B, or this activity is not resulting in good interactions with the employees. Maybe we should change this activity. Maybe we should work it as per the input of our staff. So these are things where we need to do certain activity where the leaders get involved. So measuring process, the measuring the progress, keeping open channels of communication, having the power to listen, educate your second level, lead by example, welcome input and transparency. These are jobs that leadership really needs to. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Meher. So, Dr. Rana, prior to we coming to you again, if you wish to add any points on it. Well, actually, Ms. Sushmita Khare might have to move out from the discussion because she has a prior work commitment. So, Ms. Sushmita, prior to leaving us today, and apologies for that, prior to you leaving the discussion for today, any closure comments, any tips that you wish to share with our attendees today on how can they cultivate a feeling of belongingness amongst their employees?
Meher and Dr. Rana, they both have actually covered it totally. It comes from the top. And I think in fact, without making it very obvious, we can do it in a very simple and seamless manner. It can be part of the employee engagement processes. It can be, part of the games and the fun activities that we have in the organization. It can have serious policies also attached to it. And there is no single formula how to to get in these things included into the organizations. So I can give you some examples. Is when I was what we used to do is, as Meher started with it, we started including a lot of activities in our employee initiatives and engagements, initiatives that which would include them also to think about it, and it's a kind of a training as to what about if we have these people included, what about if we have specially abled people coming and helping us in our organization, what about just make them participate into the whole decision making. And I think the acceptance will be much more greater by the colleagues around. And as we also sensitize our people by showing them a lot of movies and taking them to a lot of orphanages and shelter homes and other places where they could go and connect with them and relate with them. And when We told them, can we welcome to our organization? They were happily accepting it. So these are the ways that we did to accept people into the system. So I think that's how we can do. And as Meher said, we have to change our mindset, and we need to first start thinking about it as to how do we do. We need to be unbiased about this and start accepting it. Our social uh, taboos into all these things have to go back. Our perceptions have to change. And if as a leader we change this and we talk positively about the inclusion and diversity of today, I think it will be accepted by everybody, the whole workforce in the organization. And sometimes I say, being in HR, sometimes it is by force and sometimes it is by with willingness. So both the rules and process applies here. So sometimes you have to do it and they have to accept it, and sometimes they welcome it, open-heartedly. So it's a combination of both, and I think we should be open to it and we should start thinking about it very seriously. Yeah.
Sure. So thank you, Ms. Sushmita, for giving us your valuable time today. And we hope that you join us in future again for some other discussions. Thank you for your time. So now I'll be, Ms. Sushmita,
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm really sorry. I have to move out in between the discussion. It is very interesting. However, I'll meet you again in some other panel discussion.
Sure.
Thank you, Susmita. Thank you very much.
you.
You are here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Meher.
So, Dr. Rana, I would ask you again if you have any points to add with regards to how can leadership percolate diversity and inclusion, the feeling of belongingness within the organization, and you could share some points on it.
Yeah, thank you. See, Sujata, the cultural fabric of the organization ultimately is built around the vision of the leadership. So they cannot absolve themselves of the responsibility of creating that. So I think it's as simple as that. The total responsibility, what sort of policies, systems, cultures should be there in the organization is totally dependent on the leadership style and people in the leadership. So here, I would say, I would add 2 points basically. One is that leading from the front. This is something which cannot be delegated only to the HR department, that you create this thing and you implement in the organization. I have nothing to do. I am doing my work, you do your work. So it cannot happen this way. Second most important is that why not to integrate the diversity strategy into the core business, right? We are here to do business, and we have our customer base all across. We want new markets to be explored and to win over. So why not to have representation of the people of the customer base? So I think it is only the mindset change if we think that way. Just think a hospital is giving services to women but doesn't imply women. So probably no women would like to go over there. So if the business strategy is attached to the diversity strategy and the culture of inclusiveness is created there, I think the most of the problem is solved. In the policy framework, even if you start doing it, you will have a lot of glitches, lot of issues coming in. So the management should be approachable and ready to listen to issues and working upon the solutions, right? So I think these are few things I can think of adding what Dr. Meher has said. I think she has covered and made my situation a bit difficult to add more points.
But you can also think she made your job easy by
That's the benefit that comes from answering the question first. So if he answered the question first, I would be saying exactly these lines.
Certainly. So, well, we'll be soon moving to our question and answer session. So just a reminder to our attendees, please send in your questions that you wish to ask on diversity and inclusion from our speakers. And now to both the speakers, as we are closer to a conclusion of today's panel discussion, so I would request each speaker to maybe, in 30 seconds or 1 minute, if you can share some tips towards building truly inclusive firms and cultivating a sense of belongingness amongst the employees.
Yeah.
So Dr. Rana, this time if you answer first, and then maybe we could close it with Dr. Meher.
Yeah. Okay. So it is, again, I would say the creating of policies which has the space for inclusiveness and adding to the people with all diversified strata they are coming from. And again, creating a culture where they are respected the way they are. The policies, the systems, the arrangements, whatever is required to be done, and creating that environment where people feel comfortable and in the organizational cultural setup, they feel belong to, they are, the trust factor is there, respect factor is there, and people feel at home. I think if we can build that in the organizational culture, people will feel happy and they will be more productive.
Sure, thank you. So Dr. Meher, please.
Now my turn.
Closure.
Okay. So there's a point that we didn't touch upon, so I'm going to just touch upon it very briefly. In the newer times, in the last 6 years, I've not even 6, I think rather 10 years now, that I've seen the inclusion of use of technology for enhancing culture, diversity, and inclusion. Technology has played a very, very big role in order for us to be connected with our employees who are across the country or globally. Technology has been a facilitator. Technology is helping us in today's times. So technology really has a really large role to play. I recall the time that I was when I stepped into Oxygen, and we had a large sales force of 150 plus employees. I mean, large, it's not so large, but it was medium sized large. And they would, and because we were working in the rural space, they would only know the local language. I was looking after training at that point of time, and I said, how will I ever converse with this boy who's part of my team? How will I ever be able to motivate him? And how will I ever be able to connect with him in order to tell him that, buddy, you're doing a good job, and I'm with you, and I'm standing with you, and so on and so forth. And how will I train him on processes, HR, procedures, general sales operations? How will I teach him all that? So we then developed a website where we recorded trainings, and we converted them into different languages. We had to hire somebody from outside to do, language coverage and so on and so forth. And we were able to communicate with that sales guy who's working in deep rural India. This was years ago, and it was facilitated by technology. But then we realized that there were apps that came about, Google Talk and Google Translate, and it became just so easy to be able to communicate and overcome that language you can hear in Hindi. So I mean, it's just amazing that such things do exist today. So technology has helped us. Now coming back to your point for the closing points.
Dr. Meher,
I've just written down a few points, and I'm going to read them out. I'll just switch off the video. Yeah, can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Yes, it's better.
Okay. So connect with your employees, be open-minded, support and celebrate employee differences. I repeat, support and celebrate employee differences. Every employee is different. No two employees are alike. You could bunch them into a bucket and say, these are the smart ones, and these are the jumping ones, and these are the quiet ones, or these are the shy ones, and so on and so forth. But these employee differences need to be celebrated, and celebrated publicly. Only then will employees in your organization feel safe. They will not feel shy For example, you have a Muslim guy and during Eid he wants to go and say namaz, but the policy, and he's shy because he feels that, you know, if I say this, it's not going to be right and it may not sound right in a workplace. But hey, if I'm an open organization, he feels confident that he can come up to me and tell me that I need to go for namaz. And it will be even better if I as an organization say that, hey Salim, you have namaz time, are you going to go for namaz or not? So that is the difference. So these things, celebrating these differences and making sure that the employees feel safe. We need to rethink our meetings, every meeting that we have in HR or as leadership, one-to-one or in a group. There are many small things that are said in those meetings, but we need to take our cue. We need to be sharp enough to pick up our cues from those conversations and say, hey, I think there is a problem over there. So rethink your meetings, everyone, whatever meetings that you may have, rethink them. One-to-one, one-to-many does not matter. Friendly, not so friendly does not matter. Somebody could be great friends with you and telling you something and not as HR, but remember the HR cap always has to be worn. The HR cap is you, it's inside you. And so whatever you're hearing from a friend or colleague at work has to be seen with an HR cap. Create resource groups. Try and create groups where you feel that you cannot reach out to everyone. Try and create resource groups which are um, uh, cross-functional, which are different, where people can from different departments can join in. It just helps. Speak about inclusion. HR must try and speak about inclusion. We must tell our employees what we are trying to do. They probably don't know they're being included. They have no idea that they're being included in something. So we need to tell them that what is inclusion and what are we trying to do and why should you feel included and why should you be included? And hey, what more can you do to include someone else into our inclusive program? So these are the points really that I have.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Meher, for that.
Sujata, I want to add one more point.
Certainly.
Because see, today the good organizations, particularly this culture is there in the multinational companies, that they have started forming diversity committees. Some issues? Okay. They have started creating diversity committees, and many organizations even have started employing diversity officers, maybe in the HR department itself, or maybe an independent portfolio, where they are responsible to ensure that issues relate to diversity or inclusions, if any, if they come into their notice, that they try to address that. I think that's also a good practice, and organizations should adapt to that.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Rana, for sharing these views. So with this, we'll be soon moving to our Q&A session. Just a reminder about our upcoming webinar scheduled for 17th of July at 4 p.m. It is succession planning, building the next gen starts now. So please make a note of it and join us next week, register for it. And here HR and industry leaders talk about succession planning and how these challenging times can really be utilized to the fullest to pay attention to such important interventions. So with that, we will be initiating the Q&A session for today. So a few questions that we had pre-received. So one of the questions is for Dr. Meher. Despite good intentions, several diversity and inclusion initiatives at organizations, they either fail or they are ineffective. So what can organizations do?
Yeah, so basically this is, I mean, it's a very general umbrella kind of question, and it will be difficult to answer if I do not have the background of the organization in question that we are discussing and what was the scenario there. But there are, through my experience, all that I can tell you is that there are a lot of inclusion activities at a workplace that fail. But just because they have failed, it does not mean that there are no learnings from it. As long as it doesn't fall through the cracks where people have not pushed it through, then HR is to blame because they've not probably pushed the people enough to get down to that activity. But when you do try and do something, then and there is a problem where your policy has not been implemented, or your idea has not happened, or your engagement has not resulted in positive results, then that's when you try to modify, you try to change. It's all about being adaptable, it's all about changing and seeing what works better. Every organization has a different kind of employee base. Every employee is a different person. So I mean, to build something and to say, hey, this program works best, may not, uh, I mean, one shoe cannot fit all. So we need to make sure that we whatever policy we put into place can be adapted. We have learnings from our mistakes, we have learnings from these failures, and we take them forward to make something even better. The point is never to give up.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Meher. So yes, it's even in the face of failures, think about the learnings that you can take from it for your next initiatives on DNI. Thank you for that. So Dr. Rana, one of the attendees has directed a question to you that FMCG is known to be an industry wherein female workforce is very low. Agree, it is hard, but now even Indian Defense Forces have opened up its arms for females. So is it a time for the ceiling to break and even have frontline sales force be inclusive of females?
Yes, I agree to an extent the allegations put on FMCG industry. But it
Because
is
of
probably,
futuristic aspect.
yeah. But now the things are changing. It's even in the manufacturing today, you would see that a lot of women employees are there who are working in the factories and uh, doing all manufacturing processes, right from manufacturing even to the packaging and other things. Uh, FMCG, again in the corporate office, you will find a lot of women working, and even in the sales, particularly after this modern trade and institutional sales is having a major stake nowadays. So a lot of female employees in directly into sales are also inducted and working. So there is no war as such that they can't work, but only yes, this particular issue is there in particular roles where the traveling is more, or where they have to stay outstations at times. So, but since the mindset is changing, days are not very far off when probably this will not come into.
Sure.
So,
So I want to add over here. I mean, we also have a very large sales distribution network where we have a lot of sales force, and we've always found it challenging to hire female employees in such a job, because it involves a lot of traveling, a lot of staying over, and since we work in rural areas, we are more concerned about safety and security of these ladies than checking on their, I'm sure that they are 100% qualified and probably could do a better job. But however, we've had recently in these COVID times, there's a lady who works for us through Mahila Arthik Vikas Mahamandal. She works in somewhere in Gondia in Maharashtra, in deep rural India. And what we do is that we are currently in these COVID times, we are passing on benefits to women who are in villages, the 500 rupees that the PM has promised these women. So we have a network where through SBI we send this money across to these ladies, and we have a device which is like a micro ATM that's wireless and can be carried around by people. So we have a lady employee who cycles more than 30 kilometers out of Gondia and travels around to villages and knocks on people's doors and gives them their 500 bucks through that micro ATM machine. She carries her own sanitizer, she wears her own mask, and it's been a real, it's been a matter of pride, and we made a small video on her and we put it on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. We feel great pride when we see women achieving these, and she is really our Corona warrior, because she's right there and she's doing her job, and she's doing it in a remote village, not caring how far she's cycling and how far she's going. Every day she goes in a new direction, every day she delivers money across people. So yes, it is difficult, but if the woman has the right support in her village, in her home, then there's nothing that she can't do. So if we do come across such talent, I mean, even whether it's FMCG or our kind of, we do look at engaging such talent, and we feel blessed that we have such talent on board.
Certainly an inspiring story. Thank you for sharing that, Dr. Meher. So a related question, Dr. Rana, was that, what are some of the key challenges and tensions that often arise as we strive to create inclusive organizations?
Yeah, so the mainly the challenge is the cognitive thought process of the individuals at any level. I would say any level, right from the colleague to the top management. So one is this particular aspect. Second is like openness of the organization, as we have earlier also we discussed on the openness, that the people should feel that this is their organization and they are respected and cared for what they are. So if that particular things are managed, I think inclusiveness can be considered in the organization.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rana, for that. Dr. Meher, I'll direct this next question to you. Not everyone may be on board with the initiatives which HR heads plan to take. So how can you overcome internal resistance?
Okay, so I have tremendous experience in this one space where we've seen internal resistance, and internal resistance causes companies to fail. So what we set out to do, we failed because of internal resistance. It was also coupled with the economic situation and plenty of other things. But internal resistance, if it builds up, it becomes a storm. And it is up to the leadership at that point of time to make sure that they quash anything that comes their way. Not listening to people whispering in your ears, but to actually going there and looking at what's going on ground. This is more of conflict management. If conflicts are managed in an organization, then inclusion can happen. If you already have conflict within the organization, you can forget about everything. You can forget about diversity, you can forget about inclusiveness. You first tackle conflict. You have to have change management where, if you feel the management should have that power, that if the management feels that there are certain troublemakers who may be great performers, remove them. Because one rotten apple will spoil the entire cart. So there's nothing else that you can do. There will always be resistance. Nothing comes easy. Even in that story where, you were talking about going and washing hands, the child resisted, the father picked up, and he could take him because he was his son. But not everyone who works for you in an organization is your son, and you won't be able to carry the entire organization. There are many organizations who are beautifully bonded. They may have conflicts at point 1 and point 2, but those conflicts, if they are managed well, or if there is change management where the leadership voices their opinion, they agree that they agree to disagree and say, okay, we are going to carry on with it, and then there is no problem then. So there are different things that happen, but resistance to inclusion could be, in this case, only resistance to a certain kind of policy. Okay, it could be employability, for example, or employing more lady employees, and you may feel the business owner may feel that a woman perhaps because of different reasons may not be able to deliver that job. On the contrary, like I have seen a resistance when I was working with the airlines. I was working with Cathay Pacific, and we were an all-girl airline crew, and we were 450 Indians, we were 700 Japanese, and we were really huge gang of 7 nationalities. And we didn't have a single guy, and people would always say that why the hell can't we join? And I'm talking about very early 90s. Why can't we join the airline? And why can't we? Da 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 da. Da. And no airlines anywhere in the world had male employees other than Air India. At that point of time, Air India had male cabin crew. The world took notice of it, and the world decided, in airlines across the world decided to include men in cabin crew. And it only proved fruitful because the guys could haul more stuff. They were stronger. They could pick up all those carts and run around the galley and do all the menial work that a woman was actually physical work that not menial but physical work that a woman was doing. So I mean, I'm just saying that there was resistance of a different kind at that point of time, where men wanted to come into a woman predominated industry. Nurses, for example, nurses are somehow always women in medical business, who have always been women. Why can't there be a male nurse? And that also started some 30 years ago. They started a wave where men came into the space of nursing. So I mean, it's happening cross functionally. So that's what it is.
So with that, just a last question, and I would request both the speakers to, briefly, maybe in 20 seconds, 30 seconds, answer it. Somewhere, Dr. Meher, you had already touched upon it earlier. So if you want to build upon it further. So a lot of firms may have undertaken sporadic initiatives, ad hoc initiatives. So is it time that organizations should also evaluate, assess what has been done so far, and then have a strategy in place? So Dr. Rana, if we could start with you, and then we could conclude with Dr. Meher's comments on it.
See, as earlier also it has been spoken that the diversity and inclusion is not a simple subject as it looks on the face. It requires deep-rooted culture of adaptation to the individuals and their beliefs, their protected beliefs, I would say. So here, non-serious attempts probably will not give results. It is only to maybe a showcase that we are doing something, but ultimately not happening. So as I told you, that unless we make it a business case, that this is the culture of my organization and this has to be implemented and everybody has to get in line with this, I think it's not going to happen. So maybe reward and recognition is something which can help. Maybe sensitization can help. Maybe a strong policy framework with the reward and punishment is there. And ultimately, the commitment of all the collaborators is important.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Rana. So Dr. Meher, how about assessing, and evaluating the progress, and then thinking about the way forward?
Yeah, so I've already mentioned, and I've touched upon this topic, I think, quite in detail, that it is very, very important to use analytics to see how we are progressing. Other than that, another very important thing, that even if you do not have diversity and inclusion happening at your organization for whatsoever reason, HR always does HR engagement. HR engagement, team bonding, team building. These are all working towards inclusiveness. It may not be diversity, but it works towards inclusiveness. Another very, very important thing that people can think of implementing in their organizations is converting, and I'm saying this wearing my marketing hat, is that if they convert every employee in that works for them, whether it's a housekeeping boy or whether it's the top person in the organization, into a brand ambassador. The minute the employee becomes a brand ambassador, then we know that something is happening. There is a wave that is going to come where every employee feels that pride towards the organization. They feel that they belong to that organization. They feel safe. And that's where inclusion can also start. So making every employee a brand ambassador for that organization would work wonders. So make employees feel important.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Meher, for that. And with this, we are concluding today's panel discussion. I would like to thank all of our attendees who have joined us on YouTube and who have been regulars with us. And I take this opportunity to also thank our esteemed panelists for sharing their some of the insights, some learning, some observations, as well as a few thoughts for the way forward. Thank you for that. And this is a note that all HR professionals, rather across the globe, not just in India, but across the globe, need to take, that diversity and inclusion is an essential factor that needs dedicated efforts. Yes, to build inclusive workforce, you will have to make continuous efforts, have sensitization programs, and do not have ad hoc initiatives, but rather planned initiatives for the entire year. And it starts from top. So yes, your leadership as well as HR themselves have to work towards building diverse and inclusive workforces. There are studies that have actually proven that how inclusivity actually converts and translates to enhanced revenues. So that is one of the major motivating factors for organizations to invest their time and efforts on building diverse and inclusive workforces and building resilient organizations with inclusive workforce. So thank you for that. This is Creating Values Webinar Fridays signing off for today, and we hope to see you again on 17th of July at 4 p.m. for succession planning. Building the next gen starts now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sujata.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Rana. Thank you, Sujata.
Thank you. Pleasure meeting you, Dr. Meher.
Thank you. Thank you. Likewise. Thank you so much.